Alright, this video is for you if you're creating a campaign that is in a city but not just in a city. You don't want just a city map in order to map out where your adventurers are going to go, and you don't want to have an entire kingdom that they will take months or years to explore. You want a city and a little bit more, a city setting, if you will. And so I got the map and the tutorial for you to use later on. And what's more, this map is, and I've been asked to do this a lot, an isometric map. I've kind of dallied around with it a little bit in the past, especially with the Undercity map. But as always, that's not enough for the ravenous hordes of subscribers. And I am coming back with a new version of it, something that's a little bit more pictorial, reminiscent of the Feywild map that I did a while ago. So this is, once again, a commission. This is the third week in a row we've managed to have a commission here, and I wanted to thank Josef for allowing me to use this. This is a campaign setting map that I created with him for his own campaign that is in the Cloud Empress game. For those who aren't familiar with it, I suggest looking it up because I don't know that much about it myself, but I do know that it's based on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is absolutely excellent. There's a Studio Ghibli film that you can definitely check out, and that film really inspired the style and concepts that I use in this map. So I'm going to talk you through the process of precisely how I took it from inception and a few pages worth of lore to a fully fledged illustrated isometric map that you can use the concepts of in your own world. And I'll do it all in this video. So get your notes out. This is part of a series of videos that I'm doing on this topic. But this is the first video that I've ever done that really ventures into a city setting, something that's based on a city, but not just on a city, that you can use for a short campaign rather than for an open world adventure. And this setting really lends itself to it. We're going to be talking about Adonaeus, which is the series of caverns inhabitable because of the crystals that suck up the pollution, the fungal forests, the dark caverns around it, and of course the ruins of Neo Yumaria to the far north, where dwells the regret of the olden times. So, there's a lot here in this lore to look at, but I'll go more into that later. As always, we're going to start with a blank A2 sheet of paper, and the first thing we're going to do is going to start out with a sketch. Now, this sketch I did beforehand. Generally, when I do a commission, I will sit down, I'll do the sketch first, I'll send photos of the sketch to the commissionee so they can approve it, and in this case, that's precisely what I've done. Saves me time in the long run, but I didn't, for this video, as I've done in previous videos, outline the sketching process. If you want to see more of that, you can check them out. But not on this particular map. This particular map, I'm focusing mainly on the illustration and the content creation of the caverns themselves. So the first thing that I want to talk about is creating the areas around the city. The city itself is not the focus here. It's the center, but it's not the only place we put the details on. So when I create the city, I want to ask myself what's around it. And in this case, I'm going to pull it to the bottom center of the map so that I can have things to either side and above it, because it was made very clear to me in the concept writings that the north has the ruin of Neo Yumaria. That's really important for the setting. It's really important for the world building and the lore. So that's going to be our focus to the north of the map. We've got the city down the bottom. We've got the ruins up the top. And so either side, we've got the various surroundings. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to illustrate the crystals here. And I'm going to do something like that for all of the caverns to imply something to the viewer that they can have a look at. It adds to the isometric quality. It makes a very illustrated kind of map. And it lends itself to the Studio Ghibli style that I want to evoke. It's not necessary for your own map, but you can do it if you want to do it. I'm not the boss of you. So I want to talk about creating a city setting by balancing concepts. And the concepts that you really need to balance when you create a city setting is what tethers them and what lures them. When you're creating a person who lives in a city, they will stay in the city for a specific reason. Those are the tethers, the ambient reasons for the city existing. It's why people stay. And they stay for things like comfort and family and promise and power and safety. Those are the things that exist before the quest starts. This is the Hobbiton of this area. It's nice and peaceful. It's beautiful. It's aesthetic. It's gentle. It's nice. It's got a marketplace. It's got a lake. You can look at crystals. It's hunky-dory. You love that. But eventually you're going to want to give your players a reason to leave. You want to lure them out of the city. There are a bunch of ways that you can do that as well. You can lure them out with adventure, with promises of glory, with solutions to problems that overwhelm the setting. Hobbiton is a great example of that. They go to save the Shire. They could be lured out by promises of riches or even prophecy. The concept of destiny is a really great lure if they think that it's unavoidable. So as you can see, I'm going through now and I'm painting everything out. I started by doing the crystals, and then I thought, you know what, that's not enough. I really want to give the impression that it's a welcoming, a gentle kind of place. So I decided to paint in some grasslands, and the watercolor really looks good. So I am very into that. So as I do that, I'm going to go through and fill out the rest of the caverns around it. And I'm going to talk about areas of safety for a city-based setting. Now, the city itself doesn't have to be safe if you're creating it. I just want to talk about the concepts of it so you can apply it to your map. Because when you're in a city, and that's the basis for your campaign, you can either bring people from outside to the city, or you can have them have lived there forever. In which case, you need them to have a home, which is a safe place. So the center of it is your starting point. That's where they're relatively protected, where they have something that they want to defend, where they can go out to quests from there. Then, of course, you go to the inner ring, if you will. And in this case, those are the caverns to either side of Adonaeus, which have threats. Yes, they're dangerous, but they're not overwhelmingly dangerous. That is reserved for the outer ring, where the strange things lurk. So here's another way of illustrating this kind of concept. Think about it in terms of levels of danger. You've got level 1 at one end, and that's safe. There's no real ambient dangers. That's your living room. That's sitting in front of the fire on a warm winter's night. That's nice. We like that. Then at the far end, you've got level 5. And that's deadly. Everything here wants to eat you and make your bones dance. And between those, you've got the various other levels where things are unsafe, where they're dangerous, where they're perilous. And you've got a sliding scale of how scared your players should be. And I've used that to great effect on this particular map. But before we get into that, let's talk about the kinds of dangers that you can encounter and how they stack. I'll put it into practice later on, but for now, while I'm illustrating these mushrooms, trust the process. I'm going to take a bit of a pause here and say that please trust the process. Trust the process. I was going through this entire thing, drawing these mushrooms and being like, I'm really not sure about this. I don't like the way it looks. I'm a terrible artist. Nobody likes me. I'm going to be friendless forever. I'm going to die in a hole. But now, at the end, I can look back and say, just trust the process. Just trust the process. Trust the process. Trust the process. Anyway, I'm going to start going through and outlining the caverns now with a thick fine liner pen. As always, I use different thicknesses of fine liner pen for different functions. In this case, the thickest is the cavern walls, then a thinner one to outline the illustrations, another thinner one to do interior details, and then the thinnest one does the shading, which is going to be much, much later on. And in and amongst them, I will have labeled everything. I wrote the labels in pencil first so I knew where they would be located. Always remember that it's very difficult to erase things from under watercolor. So where you can, do not paint over your pencil. So let's talk about the kinds of dangers that you can encounter, because there are quite a few of them that are available. And I'm going to use the standard old dungeon crawl system, in which there are ambient rooms, there are environmental dangers, there are traps, puzzles, and combat, and dead ends. Yeah, that's it. So that's a great kind of rubric and idea, and we can extrapolate that for this map. An ambient room is a safe room. An environmental danger is something that doesn't hate you, and it will exist either way. You just need to come up with a way of dealing with that. A trap or a puzzle was built by someone, which implies hostile inhabitants, but it could also be things like being forcibly removed from your goal. For instance, a tunnel collapsing behind you is a trap that stops you retreating back to a safe area. That's a danger in and of itself. Environmental dangers like exhaustion or lack of supplies, hunger and starvation and thirst are also dangers, as well as things like poisonous gases or lack of light. Combat can mean not only ambushes and patrols of intelligent enemies, but also creatures that live in the darkness. Let's bring this back. I've used those for this board here and kind of illustrated levels of danger that you can bring in. So a safe area has no real ambient or active dangers. An unsafe area is something that has environmental dangers, as in that's not going to chase you, but it is something that you need to overcome in order to pass it. Dangerous inhabitants are the same. They're going to stay in their area, but you need to figure out a way to get past them. The third level is being trapped away from safety, because that's a psychological danger, and it means that you will run out of supplies or that you could encounter things that will overwhelm you. You can't retreat. So that's a big, big danger that's not to be underestimated. Deadly traps and puzzles are also here, and exhaustion or starvation are also under this category. There is a ticking time bomb. You can escape from environmental dangers or inhabitants. You cannot escape from starvation. The next level is the perilous stuff. You have organized enemies who can think in a dangerous environment, so you can be ambushed or lured into traps. You have to deal with several different kinds of threat at the same time, which leads us to the last one, in which you have every single kind of danger imaginable. You are trapped in an environment in which you're slowly going to starve, in which you cannot sleep, in which there are poisons and aggressive animals all around you. You are being chased by an enemy. That is a deadly environment. That is an arena that you are not certain you will be able to survive. And so that gives us our sliding scale. And I'll talk about how I brought that into the map later on. And you can see here on the page, we've laid the caverns out. Now I've even used a bit of color to differentiate between the areas. It's very reminiscent of my Feywild map, which looks fairly nice, honestly, but it's not. Look, I finished that map and was like, it doesn't look really, really good. It looks kind of good, doesn't look really, really good. I want this map to look really, really good for Isaac's benefit as much as my own. So I'm going through now, I'm going to do the interior details with the finer pen that I talked about before, like the sides of the crystals, the caps of the mushrooms, things like that added a little bit more richness and texture to the environment. And it's not quite a Studio Ghibli style that I've done here. I needed something that was going to be a little bit more defined, but it is reminiscent, and I am happy with how that turned out. So let's talk about the environment itself. Before I go into the labeling, which will come up later, let's talk about Adonaeus, because I took the concepts that we discussed before, the city setting, and extrapolated them to create a ramping danger level as you moved further and further away from the city. So we've got a safe area in the center, we've got unsafe areas immediately outside it, we've got a dangerous area that connects to a perilous area, which is the only way to get to the last area, which is deadly, which stops the players from walking out the city gates and immediately dying. So they do have that slow increase to how overwhelmed they can become. It gives you the opportunity to level them up as they go, so they're more prepared, so they can think about tactics, they can think about survivability, they can gather supplies, they can get allies, they can get information. You want to give them as much chance as possible to prepare for a deadly encounter, and the best way to do that is to warn them about it. And warning them means showing them what they can expect. So in each of those areas, I decided what was going to be inside it. The safe area has no immediate dangers. The deadly area has all of the dangers. And between those, I kind of used the prompts that I was given to flesh that out a little bit. So Adonaeus is the crystal cavern. It's safe because of the crystals themselves. That isn't to say that there aren't dangers there. There can be dangers there, but the environment itself is moderately peaceful. You could encounter thieves, theoretically. You could encounter a corrupt politician, or it could be invaded. There are all kinds of things you can bring in, but that's our safe area for now. Neo Yumaria is the ruin to the north, and that is filled with every possible bad thing in the universe. Between us, you've got to go through 2 caverns on either side at a minimum to get there. So the ones closest to us, Pelite and Foralit, I've got different kinds of encounters. Pelite has hostile inhabitants. They've got spiders in the rocks, insects that want to kill you, the occasional maddened wanderer who will take your supplies. Foralit is a poisonous subterranean sea that has things swimming within it. So if they go exploring through there, they may stir up something from the dark. I've also implied that both caverns lead off indefinitely, so they can explore the rest of the world if they want to. That's just a throwaway note for you. You can keep them enclosed, but you don't have to. Beyond those, I've got Ikoi, which is on the top right, which is an abandoned village, which gives you more culturally to extrapolate from, but also environmental dangers. It was killed because the cavern opened up to the outside world. The radiation flooded in, killed the plant life and the people, and destabilized the ground. So sinkholes are appearing, and it's slowly being swallowed by the earth. Mycosy, on the other side, is the stereotypical mushroom forest from that genre. It's a pillar of that kind of genre, and I wanted to make it into as much of a challenge as I could. So not only is it a fairly poisonous area, there are survival dangers because the mushrooms move around, so you can get trapped or get lost. There are traps and puzzles, and there are hostile inhabitants in the forms of travelers and insects. All of which leads up to Neo Yumaria, which I did a rough sketch of, enough to imply its layout, but not enough to be a mega dungeon map. If you want a mega dungeon map, I've got a video for it. If you're finding this tutorial useful to you, why don't you hit that like and subscribe button? I do one of these videos every single week. I also have written tutorials and downloadables available on my Patreon channel. So now that I've got the dangers, I can flesh it out with more of the culture of it. I'm finishing the map up now, which means that in a moment I'm going to start doing the exterior, the last step of which is to finish the borders off, do the title, and then write the notes in. I've illustrated everything now. I've done the labels. The map itself is functional at this point. I'm just going to add a few more tidbits of detail before we get there. And so now I add in the culture so that you can play off it. You know, Adonaeus is the crystal sanctuary. I want to imply as much as I can about the different villages that are there. It's not one large city. It's villages scattered around a warren of caverns. Pelite is a maze of stone teeth, where predators in the darkness await. You know, Forilit is only the nearest shore of a massive sea, poisoned by the world above. Ikoi has been opened by an ancient cataclysm, and now the winds howl through the ruins. Only by a poisonous tunnel can you make it from there to the Mycosy, which is the constantly shifting forest of toxic fungi. Toxic creatures wend their way through the waters they're in. And finally, all of those lie between Adonaeus and the greatest threat of all, the ruin of the old world, Neo Yumaria. And having done all those steps, without even touching on the culture itself, we've created a world that will not only limit your players, but challenge them and give them an end goal. Those different steps, those different rings to creating a world have given you the opportunity to stagger encounters, level them up over time, and release lore to them slowly. And you can use this all in your own map. It doesn't have to be a direct one-to-one translation, but you can definitely make it look satisfying and interesting. And here I go now. I'm just going to erase everything. I'm going to do the borders. In this case, I do want to have I do want to talk a little bit about the borders themselves, because unlike my normal flat painted, slightly irregular borders that I tend to prefer, it was requested that I add a little bit of lore in. So what I've done is I've hidden a message in the border. To call it a code would be a little bit of an overstatement. What I've done is I have written something in English and then removed parts of the letters, so that if you really look hard and you think about it, you might be able to figure out what the message says. The message itself is a little bit of lore about the world. It implies something about the religion of the inhabitants and what the players can discover over time. But it's not super important for them to figure out. So if they don't figure it out, then they haven't missed anything. And that's as important as anything else when you're creating riddles. And so now, having finished the compass rose, which I'm going to make look a little bit broken, I have finished this map up. Everything's been illustrated. I trusted the process with those mushroom trees, and it looked fantastic in the end. Overall, I'm very pleased with how this turned out. So we talked about how to create a setting that ramps danger up over time. It's based on a city that has the tethers that keep you there and the lures that pull you away, so that you can write a campaign that propels players towards danger as much as it repels them, and finding that balance of writing that you can make into a map. And so now we're done. We've finished up with this map of Adonaeus and the ruins of Neo Yumaria, and it looks pretty fantastic. I want to thank Josef again for allowing me to use this map for this video. If you have any questions, please chuck them in the comments below. I'm always very willing to discuss things. Another option is, of course, to join the Red Quills Discord, in which we're constantly sharing and discussing our map ideas. You can join the community there whenever you like. I post written versions of all of these tutorials on my website and generally have downloadables of the maps that I showcase on my Patreon. Not this week, however, because this is a commission. I have instead got a little bit of a surprise for my Patreon followers that you can check out there. Next week, we're going to be delving into the mountains for a dwarven city. I'm going to be talking about making a vertical city setting for your campaigns with this map of Heimglar, the City of Glass. So I'm very excited for that. You can check it out next week. Until then, happy mapping, and I'll see you around.